My name is Jonathan Hayes. I'm 38 years old, and I live just outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. I've worked as a financial consultant for more than a decade, helping other families protect what they've built. But for all my knowledge, for all the times I've advised people on safeguarding their wealth, I never thought I'd become the victim of betrayal myself. And I never imagined the betrayal would come from my own blood. It started with an envelope. I came home from work one evening, dropped my briefcase on the counter, and sorted through the mail the way I always did. Bills, junk flyers, a letter from the bank. Nothing unusual. At least, that's what I thought. When I tore it open, my eyes went straight to the header. Notice of account change. My trust fund account, the one my parents had established for me decades earlier, long before I knew the value of such a gift, had been altered. Documents had been submitted. My contact information changed. And attached at the bottom was a single line that made my chest tighten. Authorized by J. Hayes. Only I hadn't signed anything. At first, I thought it was a clerical error. Banks make mistakes. Systems glitch. But then I saw the scanned attachment. My name, my signature, my handwriting, or something close to it, scrawled across authorization forms I'd never seen before. My blood ran cold, because I knew exactly what this meant. Someone had stolen my trust fund papers. Someone had tried to pass themselves off as me. And the bank had accepted it. I sat there at the counter, the evening light fading through the blinds, staring at a version of my own name that didn't belong to me. My pulse pounded in my ears. My hands trembled against the thin paper. I wanted to believe it was some faceless criminal, a stranger hacking into accounts for a quick payout, but deep down, something told me otherwise. I thought about who had access, who knew where the original papers were stored, who had shown interest in them over the years, asking casual questions about their value, about how much they might be worth someday. And one face came to mind, my sister, Rebecca. She and I had grown up side by side. We'd shared bedrooms, secrets, and memories only siblings could, but we'd also shared tension. Her constant struggles with money, her envy at the opportunities I'd been given, her offhand jokes about how lucky I was that Mom and Dad had set aside that fund for me. Now those jokes didn't feel like jokes anymore. As I sat at that counter, staring at the forged signature, I realized something that made my stomach sink. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was betrayal. And not from a stranger. From my own sister. I felt a wave of anger rise in me, but I swallowed it. Rage wouldn't help. Confrontation wouldn't change the fact that she had already made her move. So instead, I went quiet. I folded the letter, placed it back in the envelope, and slid it into my briefcase. Because if she thought she could take what wasn't hers and get away with it, she was about to learn that she had underestimated me, and she had no idea what was coming next. Before that letter, before the signature that wasn't mine, I would have told you I had a good life. Not perfect, but stable. A life built on trust, on family, on the kind of foundation you think can't be shaken. I grew up in North Carolina in a middle-class home. My parents weren't wealthy, but they were disciplined. My dad worked long hours in manufacturing, and my mom taught elementary school. They pinched pennies, skipped vacations, and sacrificed so that their kids could have what they never did. When I was young, I didn't understand the sacrifices. I just knew we didn't eat out much. And our summer trips were more road trips to visit relatives than big theme parks or beach resorts. But as I got older, I realized what they were doing. They were saving, planning, thinking ahead. They wanted something better for us, not just in the moment, but for the future. That's where the trust fund came in. When I was about 10 years old, my parents sat me down in the living room and explained it. "Jonathan," my dad said, "someday you're going to have opportunities we never had. We're putting money aside for you, carefully, legally, safely, so that when you're ready, you'll have a foundation to build your life on." I didn't understand the numbers at the time, but I understood the meaning. It was their way of protecting me, of giving me a running start in life. Rebecca was in the room that night too. She was only a couple of years older than me, but the difference in how she reacted was striking. She laughed it off, shrugged, and said something like, "Well, lucky him." My parents assured her that they'd help her in other ways, that this wasn't about playing favorites, but I could feel the tension even then. Still, I thought we were close. Rebecca and I shared a childhood full of ordinary memories. Riding bikes down cracked sidewalks, fighting over who got the front seat, trading Halloween candy in the living room floor. We had our share of sibling fights, slammed doors, shouted words, but I always believed underneath it all, there was loyalty, blood thicker than water. That's what Mom used to say. As we grew older, our paths split. I went to college, studied finance, and worked my way into a stable career. Rebecca bounced from job to job, never quite landing anywhere. Retail, then waitressing, then a stint in real estate that didn't last. She was smart, but restless. Whenever we talked, money seemed to sneak into the conversation. She'd ask about my work, about investments, about how much do you think Mom and Dad really left us? She'd joke about how nice it would be to tap into that golden goose I had waiting. I always laughed it off, thinking she was just being playful. Maybe I should have paid closer attention. When our parents passed, the trust fund became more real. It wasn't a giant pile of cash I could spend freely. It was structured, controlled, designed to grow over time. I still worked my job, still paid my bills like anyone else, but in the back of my mind, I knew that safety net was there. A cushion my parents had bled for, something meant to protect me and eventually, Lily, my daughter. Rebecca knew that too. And though she never said it outright, I could feel the bitterness under her jokes. The way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes when the topic came up. But I trusted her. She was my sister. When I bought my first house, she helped me paint the walls. When Lily was born, she brought gifts and promised she'd always be there for her. When I went through a tough breakup years back, she was the one who sat with me on the porch until midnight, telling me I'd be okay. That's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't land so hard because it comes from an enemy. It crushes you because it comes from someone you never thought would aim at you in the first place. Looking back, I can see the cracks now. Little things I brushed off. The way she'd ask if I kept the trust papers at home or in a bank box. The way she once joked, "What if I borrowed it for a while? You wouldn't even notice." At the time, I laughed. Now those words feel different. But in the moment, I didn't see the danger. I thought I had a sister who, despite her struggles, loved me. I thought we were bound by the same blood, the same memories, the same parents who had taught us honesty mattered more than money. I thought we were on the same team. My life felt stable. Work was steady. Lily was healthy, growing, thriving. I had a home, friends, and family I believed I could lean on. Rebecca was part of that. She came over for birthdays, holidays, dinners. She held Lily's hand and told her stories about our own childhood. That's the life I thought I had. A life where the trust fund was a symbol of my parents' love and sacrifice, not a target for theft. A life where family meant loyalty, not greed. A life where my sister was my protector, not my betrayer. I didn't know then that every laugh, every family dinner, every casual question about finances was setting the stage for the day she would cross a line I couldn't ignore, because while I was busy living the life I thought was secure, Rebecca was already planning how to take the very foundation of it from me. Suspicion doesn't come crashing in all at once. It drips. A drop here, a drop there. And before you know it, you're standing in a flood. After I found that forged signature on the bank letter, I couldn't unsee it. I wanted to tell myself it was a mistake, some paperwork glitch. But in the pit of my stomach, I knew. Rebecca's face kept flashing in my mind. Her jokes about the trust. Her sudden curiosity about where I kept my documents. Her little smirks when money came up in conversation. And once you have suspicion in your head, everything changes. I started watching her, quietly. I noticed how she dodged certain topics, how her phone always seemed glued to her hand when we were together. I noticed how she started showing up at my house less, except when she had an errand that took her near my neighborhood. The first real crack came a week later. I went to check the lockbox at the small local bank where I kept original copies of some legal documents. When I opened the drawer, a thin layer of dust told me nobody had touched it in months. But the folder holding my trust paperwork, it looked different, out of place. When I lifted it, I realized half the papers were gone. I stood in that vault with my throat tight and my pulse hammering in my ears. Gone. Just gone. That was the moment suspicion turned into dread. I didn't tell her I knew. I didn't even hint at it. Instead, I went quiet. And in that silence, I started putting the pieces together. I pulled my bank statements, combing through line by line. Most things were normal. Groceries, mortgage, utilities. But then I saw odd charges. Courier services. Not in my area. Transactions I hadn't made. I called the bank, carefully, calmly, asking for clarifications. I didn't let on that I suspected fraud. I just asked questions. The rep mentioned documents being mailed to the address on file. Only, it wasn't my address. It was an address Rebecca had lived at years ago. That was the night the fog lifted. I didn't say a word to her. Instead, I called my attorney. We set up a meeting after hours in his quiet office. He told me to document everything. Not emotions, not suspicions, but facts. Dates, times, places, copies of every letter, every email, every transaction. So I started building a binder. Meanwhile, Rebecca kept up her act. She still texted me now and then, asking about Lily, sending photos of dinners she'd cooked, pretending like everything was normal. I played along, smiled at family dinners, answered casually. But inside, I was scanning every detail. One night, she slipped. She came over for coffee, and as she set her purse on the counter, a corner of a document peeked out. A form I recognized instantly. The header from the trust company. My pulse jumped, but I kept my voice steady. We talked about ordinary things while my eyes burned holes into that paper sticking out of her bag. She didn't notice. She laughed, sipped her coffee, and left an hour later. The second the door closed, I exhaled like I'd been holding my breath the whole time. That was no accident. She was carrying documents that should have never left my lockbox. My anger wanted to explode, but my silence kept me grounded, because anger would have tipped her off, and I needed her to keep feeling safe. In the weeks that followed, her confidence grew. She stopped hiding her new clothes, expensive ones she never could have afforded before. She dropped comments about how life was finally turning around. One night, during a family gathering, she even joked, "Maybe I'll end up richer than you one day." Everyone laughed. I forced myself to laugh too, but my stomach twisted, because I knew it wasn't just a joke anymore. The unraveling wasn't just in her behavior. It was in me too. I started staying up late, combing through records, cross-checking dates. I'd wake up at 3 a.m., heart racing, replaying her words in my head. My patience stretched thin, but I held on. Then came the night that confirmed everything. I was reviewing scanned files from the trust company's online portal when I saw it. A request for disbursement. Large, 7 figures, large. And it bore my name, my signature. But I hadn't signed it. And the date on the form matched the day Rebecca had stopped by my house with coffee. The day I saw that document sticking out of her purse. The timeline was clear now. She hadn't just stolen papers. She was actively trying to cash in the trust, to bleed it dry before I even realized it was gone. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark, the only sound my heartbeat pounding in my ears. That was it. No more wondering, no more second guessing. I knew. And still, I didn't confront her. Because by then, I understood something important. The truth wasn't enough. I needed proof. Proof that would stand in court, that would silence excuses, that would strip her lies bare in front of a judge. So I tightened my silence and sharpened my patience. I kept copying documents, printing statements, saving files in multiple places. I noted every date she contacted me, every offhand comment she made. I kept my binder growing thicker, my evidence stronger. The unraveling wasn't chaotic anymore. It was steady, deliberate, like a sweater thread being pulled inch by inch. And I was the one pulling it. Meanwhile, Rebecca had no idea. She walked around with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. She thought she had won. She thought she was smarter, quicker, bolder. But she had no idea I was watching. No idea I was documenting. No idea the noose was tightening around her every time she picked up that phone or slid another forged paper into her bag. I never yelled. I never accused. I never let her see me sweat. Because I wasn't preparing for a fight in the kitchen or an argument over coffee. I was preparing for the moment when all of it, every receipt, every form, every forged line of ink, would be laid out in front of a judge. And in that courtroom, there would be no place for her to hide. Up until then, everything I'd gathered could have been explained away. Forged signatures, missing papers, suspicious transactions. They were damning, yes, but there was always a slim chance Rebecca could twist them into misunderstandings or clerical errors. But the night I got the call from the trust company, all doubt died. It was late, around 9 p.m. Lily was asleep, and I was on the couch with a stack of statements when my phone rang. The number flashed as the trust's legal department. I answered, heart already racing. "Mr. Hayes," the woman said politely, "we're just calling to confirm tomorrow's in-person meeting regarding the disbursement of your account." I froze. "What meeting?" There was a pause. "The one scheduled under your name." We received signed paperwork requesting a full disbursement of the trust, $7,250,000. The room seemed to tilt. I gripped the phone tighter. I didn't request any disbursement. I didn't schedule any meeting. Another pause, this one sharper. "Then we may have a serious problem, Mr. Hayes." She emailed me the forms while we were still on the call. I opened the PDF and there it was. My name, my signature, My authorization. Perfectly replicated, except for one detail. A date of birth listed incorrectly, just one digit off. It was like staring into a mirror with a crack running down the middle. Everything looked familiar, but wrong. And at the bottom of the form was the contact information for confirmation. Not my number, not my email. Rebecca's. That was the snap. It wasn't suspicion anymore. It wasn't theory. It wasn't paranoia. It was proof. Undeniable, concrete, ironclad. My sister wasn't just toying with the idea of betrayal. She was actively trying to erase me from my own inheritance. I ended the call, forwarded the documents to my attorney, and sat in the dark with only the glow of the laptop screen. My chest felt hollow, my throat dry, but my mind was clearer than it had ever been. I thought about our childhood, about the nights we stayed up whispering across bunk beds, the times I covered for her when she broke curfew, the way Mom used to say, "Look out for your sister, Jonathan. Family is forever." And now here I was, staring at proof that the same sister had signed away my future, my parents' legacy, my daughter's security. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't call her to confront her. Instead, I went completely still. Because once you have proof, you don't waste it on arguments that end in denial. You save it for the moment it matters most. I sat there for hours, listening to the tick of the wall clock, replaying every moment in my head, every joke she'd made about the trust, every curious question, every time she'd waved off her money problems with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. It had all led to this. When Emily betrayed me, the snap was watching her walk into a hotel with another man. With Rebecca, it was seeing my own name twisted into a weapon against me. Both cut deep, both left scars, but this one carried a special kind of cruelty. Because it wasn't just betrayal of me. It was betrayal of our parents, of their sacrifice, of the love they had worked their entire lives to leave behind. I closed the laptop at 2 a.m. and whispered to myself, no more doubt, no more waiting. From that night forward, I wasn't a brother trying to make sense of betrayal. I was a man preparing to bring the truth into the light. I didn't sleep. I didn't need to. Something inside me had shifted, and instead of breaking me, it made me sharper. The snap wasn't about losing control. It was about taking it back. The night I stared at that forged disbursement form, I understood something crystal clear. Rebecca had crossed a line she couldn't step back over. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a joke gone too far. She had stolen my trust fund papers, faked my identity, and was hours away from walking into a bank to strip away everything my parents had left me. But I also understood something else. Emotion wouldn't win this battle. Rage, screaming, even confrontation at her doorstep, none of that would matter. She had already proven she was willing to lie, to forge, to manipulate. I needed something stronger than anger. I needed strategy. So I went quiet. I called my attorney that same night and forwarded the documents. He answered even though it was past midnight. He didn't sound surprised. "Jonathan," he said, "if she's already this deep, you don't confront her. You don't give her a chance to cover her tracks. You let us build the case." Brick by brick. That became my mantra. Brick by brick. The first brick was securing everything I already had. I scanned every document. Bank statements, trust fund records, even the old letters my parents had written when the fund was created. I stored them in multiple places, a secure cloud drive, an encrypted USB, a hard copy binder that never left my sight. I treated those papers like oxygen, because if Rebecca had already stolen once, I couldn't risk her finding another way in. The second brick was financial vigilance. My attorney arranged for immediate flags on the trust account, alerts for any attempted changes. I called the bank myself, calmly explaining the fraud, and froze any pending activity. The woman on the phone apologized over and over, but I wasn't looking for apologies. I was looking for certainty. By the time I hung up, I knew Rebecca's little meeting at the trust office the next morning would never happen. She'd show up expecting a payday, and instead, she'd meet a locked door. That thought gave me a grim kind of satisfaction, but it wasn't enough. The third brick was evidence. My attorney said it best. Judges don't care how you feel. They care what you can prove. So I went to work. I pulled Rebecca's old text messages, little comments she'd made about money, about the trust, about borrowing. I dug up emails she'd sent years back asking where I kept important documents, emails I'd brushed off as harmless at the time. I copied every bank charge that tied back to her address. Courier services, printing companies, little trails she thought nobody would follow. I even drove past her apartment one night and saw something that sealed my resolve. Through the window, stacked on her desk, were folders that looked awfully familiar. I didn't break in, didn't take photos. I didn't need to. The sight alone told me she was keeping the stolen papers close. Still, I didn't tip my hand. I smiled when she texted about Lily. I answered the phone when she called to ask about family dinner next weekend. I let her think I was still the oblivious brother who'd never suspect a thing. Because silence is the sharpest weapon when someone underestimates you. The fourth brick was preparing for court. My attorney walked me through every step, filing for injunctions, freezing assets, preparing a civil claim for damages. He spoke in careful, measured tones, reminding me that patience was as important as proof. If you rush Jonathan, she'll claim confusion. If you wait, she'll hang herself with her own lies. So I waited. In the meantime, I documented everything. I carried a small notebook in my pocket and wrote down dates, times, even short phrases Rebecca said. Money's tight. Wish I had a backup like you. Don't worry, I'll figure something out. Individually, those words meant nothing. Together, they formed a picture. The fifth brick was Lily. Every step I took, I kept her in mind. This wasn't just about me or my parents' legacy. It was about securing her future. I doubled down on being present for her. School drop-offs, bedtime stories, weekend trips to the park. My attorney told me custody wasn't even at stake in this case, but still, I wanted the court, and more importantly, my daughter, to see that no matter what storms hit, I was her anchor. There were moments I almost slipped. Times when Rebecca called and her voice dripped with fake sweetness, and I wanted to snap back, to scream, "I know what you did." Times when I drove past her apartment and imagined banging on the door, shoving the forged documents in her face. But each time I reminded myself, brick by brick, not chaos, not revenge, strategy. Weeks passed, and my binder grew thick. By the time my attorney and I sat down to review it, the evidence was undeniable. Forged signatures, bank logs, emails, patterns of access, even handwriting experts ready to testify. He flipped through the binder slowly, nodding with each page. "This," he said finally, "isn't just a case. It's a win." And then he gave me the final piece of advice. When the time comes, you don't speak in anger. You don't gloat. You let the evidence speak. You stay calm, because calm is credibility. I took that to heart. The last brick was emotional discipline. I practiced answering questions in front of the mirror, steady and measured. I rehearsed telling the story not as a wounded brother, but as a witness to the facts. I reminded myself over and over that the goal wasn't to hurt Rebecca. The goal was to show the truth. The night before the first court date, I sat at my kitchen table with the binder in front of me. I thought about my parents, about how hard they had worked, how carefully they had saved, how much trust they had placed in both of us. I thought about Rebecca, about the sister I once believed would stand by me no matter what. And then I thought about Lily, sleeping peacefully upstairs, completely unaware of the war her father was fighting for her future. I wrote one sentence on a clean page of my notebook. She stole my trust, but she won't steal my future. And with that, I closed the binder. Rebecca had no idea how ready I was. She still thought she was winning, still thought I was blind. But what she didn't know was that every step she had taken into betrayal, I had matched with preparation, brick by brick, and now the wall was complete. The next morning, it wouldn't just be her lies on trial. It would be her choices, her greed, her betrayal of the very family she thought would never fight back. And in that courtroom, she would finally see just how wrong she had been. The morning of court felt unreal. I woke up before the alarm, sat on the edge of my bed, and stared at the floor for a long time. This wasn't just another meeting or another errand. This was the day months of silence, patience, and discipline would finally meet the light. I dressed simply, navy suit, white shirt, no tie. My attorney had told me, appear steady, not flashy. Judges respect calm. I kissed Lily on the forehead before dropping her off at school, my heart heavy but steady. Then I drove downtown, binder on the seat beside me like a trusted ally. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. No grand chandeliers, no echoing ceilings, just wooden benches, polished tables, and the weight of people's lives being measured. Rebecca was already there when I walked in. She looked polished, confident, almost smug. She gave me a quick glance, a smirk tugging at her lips, as if to say, "You really think you can stop me?" I didn't respond. I sat down at my table, laid the binder flat, and folded my hands. My silence unsettled her more than anger ever could. The judge entered and proceedings began. My attorney rose first. He wasn't theatrical. He wasn't loud. He spoke with the calm precision of a surgeon, laying out the case step by step. He began with the trust itself, the origin, the terms, the significance of the papers. He emphasized my parents' intent, the structure of the fund, and the fact that it was meant to protect, not be plundered. Then he introduced the evidence. First came the bank statements, charges from courier services, document printing, transactions tied to Rebecca's old address. The judge flipped through copies as my attorney highlighted the inconsistencies. Rebecca's attorney objected here and there, but each objection fell flat. The paper trail was too clean, too undeniable. Next came the forged documents. Side by side, the judge compared my genuine signature against the fake ones. A handwriting expert took the stand, explaining in calm, technical detail how the strokes differed, how the pressure was inconsistent, how the J in Jonathan was lifted unnaturally. Every word drove the nail deeper. Rebecca shifted in her chair. Her confidence began to crack. And then came the call log. Records showing late-night calls from her number to the trust office, emails from her address setting up confirmation details, all traced directly back to her devices. My attorney displayed the headers on a projector, each one like a hammer against her defense. Rebecca's face flushed red. She whispered furiously to her lawyer, but there was no escape. The truth was on paper, glowing under the courtroom lights. Finally, the trust company's representative testified. Calm, professional, she explained how the request for disbursement had come in, how the paperwork looked legitimate until a second review revealed errors, and how Rebecca had been scheduled to arrive in person the very next day to claim the funds. That was the moment the courtroom shifted. You could feel it. Every person in that room understood the weight of what she had done. When it was Rebecca's turn, her defense was shaky. Her attorney tried to argue that it was a misunderstanding, that she had been helping me, that she thought she had permission. But the evidence crushed every excuse. Why would she forge my signature if she had permission? Why would she list her own contact details, her own address, her own phone number? The judge leaned forward, eyes steady, and asked Rebecca directly, "Did you or did you not submit these forms under your brother's name?" Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She shifted in her chair, looked down, looked at her attorney, then back at the judge. Finally, she muttered, "I didn't mean," but the judge cut her off. "This isn't about intent. This is about action, and the action is fraud." Silence fell. I sat there, hands folded, not a smile on my face. I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I just breathed, steady and calm, because this was the moment I had been waiting for. The moment the truth spoke louder than any argument. The judge reviewed the binder one last time, then delivered the ruling. Rebecca was guilty of fraud, forgery, and attempted theft of trust assets. The court ordered full restitution, damages totaling $7,250,000, and stripped her of any administrative access to the estate. The gavel struck sharp and final. Rebecca's shoulders collapsed. The smirk was gone. She looked at me then, eyes wide, mouth trembling. But I didn't return her gaze. I wasn't there to share in her shame. I was there to reclaim what was mine. As the courtroom emptied, people whispered. Some glanced at me with sympathy, others with quiet respect. I gathered my binder, thanked my attorney, and walked out without a word. Outside, the sun was shining, the city moving as if nothing monumental had just happened. Cars honked, people hurried down sidewalks, life carried on. But inside me, something had shifted permanently. Revenge wasn't the outburst, the fight, the heated confrontation. Revenge was this, calm, measured justice. The truth laid bare in a room where lies couldn't survive. Rebecca had tried to erase me with a pen stroke. She thought she could steal not just money, but my parents' legacy, my daughter's future. Instead, she had erased herself, because after that day, she was no longer my sister, not in the way that mattered, and I walked away, not with anger, not even with joy, but with peace. When the gavel struck, it was over. Months of silence, strategy, and patience came crashing down into one single moment of truth. I walked out of that courtroom lighter than I'd felt in years. Not because I was richer, not because I'd won a judgment, but because the weight of betrayal was no longer mine to carry alone. It was written into the record, carved into law, undeniable. The following weeks were a blur. Rebecca tried to call me, at first with anger, then with desperation, and finally with silence of her own. I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. The court had spoken louder than either of us ever could. At home, the air felt different. No more nights staring at the ceiling wondering if I was paranoid. No more second guessing my instincts. My house was quiet, steady. And for the first time in a long while, peace wasn't a dream. It was real. The money itself, though substantial, wasn't what mattered most. Yes, $7,250,000 is a number that can change a life. But the real change was deeper. It wasn't about a check or a balance sheet. It was about knowing that truth still holds weight, that betrayal doesn't get the last word, and that justice, even when slow, still arrives. I thought often about my parents in those weeks. I imagined what they would have said if they'd seen what Rebecca tried to do. I knew they'd be heartbroken, but I also knew they would have been proud that I didn't let her succeed, that their sacrifice, their years of saving and planning, hadn't been stolen or wasted. That Lily's future, the future they wanted to protect, was still safe. As for Rebecca, I mourned her in a way. She didn't die, but the sister I grew up with, the one who used to race me down sidewalks and share candy with me after Halloween, she was gone. What remained was someone I didn't recognize, someone who valued greed over family, lies over loyalty. And that's something I had to accept. But grief, even when it cuts deep, eventually fades. What takes its place is resilience. I poured myself into Lily's world. Saturday mornings at the park, homework at the kitchen table, bedtime stories that stretched past bedtime because she begged for one more page. I wanted her to grow up, knowing that no matter what storms came, her father stood firm, that even when family betrayed us, we didn't crumble. People asked me later if I regretted not confronting Rebecca sooner, if I wished I had exploded, called her out, screamed my pain in her face. The answer is no. My silence wasn't weakness. It was strength. It gave me the space to build a case she couldn't wriggle out of. It turned my anger into action, my suspicion into strategy. And in the end, it gave me something better than revenge. It gave me closure. The lesson I carry now is simple. Trust is a gift, not a guarantee. You give it freely, but once it's broken, it can't be pieced back together the same way. Rebecca stole papers, but what she really stole was the bond between us. That can't be repaid. But she couldn't steal my peace. She couldn't steal my dignity. She couldn't steal the part of me that endures, adapts, rebuilds. That's the life I live now. Not perfect, not untouched by scars, but stronger, clearer, real. Because when someone tries to erase you, the greatest revenge isn't just proving them wrong. It's standing taller in the ruins and building something even stronger in their shadow. Rebecca thought she took everything. What she really did was show me what can never be taken. If this story touched you, don't forget to hit that like button. It means more than you know. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more true stories of justice and resilience. Every week, I bring you real human battles and how they were won. Stay strong, stay hopeful, and I'll see you in the next story.